Sounds good. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dave Anderson. I have the privilege of serving as a senior policy fellow at the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy based right here on this campus. Thank you for joining us at the UW Center for Civic Engagement this evening. Tonight you will hear from 7 candidates across 4 races that will be on your ballot in 15 days. Those races include the United States Senate race, the U.S. Congressional race for District Number 7, the State Senate race for District Number 29, the State Assembly race for District 85. Tonight's forum is brought to you in partnership with the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce, the Wisconsin Institute of Public Policy and Service, and the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point at Wausau. Before we begin tonight's forum, I would like to welcome UWSP Wausau Campus Executive, Dr. Ozala Toms, to the stage. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Toms.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Ozala Toms, and I serve as the campus executive for this amazing campus. On behalf of the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce, Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service, and the UWSP at Wausau campus, we would like to welcome all the candidates, their staff, the community members, and any guests we have outside of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Toms. Before we welcome our first candidate to the stage, I'd like to remind all attendees that this forum is a setting for all ideas and platforms to be shared. With that, any disruptors will be asked to leave the facility immediately. Lastly, if all attendees could silence their cell phones, that would be greatly appreciated. Without further ado, I would like to get started with our first race of the evening, the National Senate race. Tonight, our races will go in descending order based on size of constituency, with the incumbent party going last. With that, our first participant would be the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes. Unfortunately, he could not attend due to a prior commitment. With that, I would like to welcome to the stage Senator Ron Johnson. Senator Johnson? Senator Johnson, thank you for joining us. Please take the next 5 minutes and introduce yourself and your platform.
Sure. Well, I'm Senator Ron Johnson. My background is educationally, I'm an accountant. For 30 years, I started up, operated, and then ended up owning a manufacturing business, produced plastic sheet primarily for medical device packaging. Sold it all over the world. We exported plastic to China, as a matter of fact. 2009, 2010, during the Tea Party movement, when we were mortgaging our kids' future and passing a piece of legislation that I didn't think would particularly do the job. It didn't protect patients, didn't make healthcare more affordable. I decided to run for U.S. Senate and was elected in 2010. So I've had a lifetime of experience in the private sector, raising a family, building that business, creating good paying jobs in the manufacturing sector. I believe I've done a pretty good job as your U.S. Senator. I have some pretty significant accomplishments. A lot of it's been distorted, unfortunately, in kind of the viciousness of our politics. But for example, during Republican tax reform, we were only going to cut taxes for about 5% of American businesses, the C Corps. Coming from a small business background, I realized that was going to be a huge mistake, and we were going to put small businesses at a huge competitive disadvantage. So I dug my heels in, bucked my party. I withstood the scorn of Wisconsin conservative talk radio, and made sure that 95% of American businesses also got a tax cut. About 20 million tax filers. Don't believe what you hear on the ads. It wasn't a special carve-out for anybody. 20 million tax filers, mainly small businesses, got a tax cut so they could stay competitive with the big guys, and so many have come up to me and told me that they're also able to survive the pandemic. So I'm pretty proud of that. I also, having met with the Goldwater Institute, and then a couple weeks later meeting with a mom called Trickett Wendler, a woman who had ALS, committed to her that I wanted to champion a piece of legislation called Right to Try. Goldwater was passing it state by state, but they needed a governing bill at the national level to make it all work. I championed that. It took me probably 3 or 4 years, working hard, working with pharmaceutical companies so they wouldn't object, working with the other side. Finally got it to a point where we could pass it by unanimous consent through the Senate. Still had some hurdles in the House, but in the end, Right to Try finally passed. Today, it is actually saving lives. The most recent example is even during COVID, there's a drug, unfortunately, the FDA hasn't given us its blessing. It's not widely available. A lot of people don't know about it. It's called Zysami, a Vitpidil. It's often used for premature infants. It's a lung surfactant, helps their lungs develop. One doctor in Houston has used it on 19 patients. These are end-of-life COVID patients. And signing the last wills and testament, I asked the doctor, 16 of the 19 walked out of the hospital, and I asked him what kind of lung damage they had, and he said, no, Senator, these 16 people walked out of the hospital healed because of my Right to Try law. So I'm pretty proud of that. I don't think there are many senators that can really take a look and say, again, 20 million tax filers, compete the big guys, survive the pandemic, and you have a piece of legislation that saves lives. The other thing I'm pretty proud of had nothing really to do with government at all, other than my staff participates in this, but it's called the Joseph Project. It's a program. We established this with the Greater Praise Church of God in Christ in inner city Milwaukee. And just through 4 days of training, 3 hours a day, and then on the 5th day we actually provide interviews, but it takes people that are just basically hit rock bottom, formerly incarcerated, drug, alcohol abusers, again, just people just completely down on their luck, that have made the commitment to turn their lives around, and gives them that opportunity. It's literally transformed hundreds of lives. We have a branch up actually here in Wausau. Pastor Yao here is doing a really good job. We have a branch in Green Bay. And I always talk about it transforming hundreds of lives. I had one of the Joseph Project participants tell me, no, Senator, it's impacted thousands of lives. I've got family, I've got friends. So again, those are 3 major accomplishments from my standpoint. As Chairman of Homeland Security, I also passed about 300 pieces of legislation out of our committee, completely nonpartisan, bipartisan, by focusing on areas of agreement. More than 130 of those bills got passed into law in some way, shape, or form. So again, I'm pretty proud of what I've accomplished. I think my experience level, I think, suits me well for another term.
Thank you very much for that introduction. With the 2022 fall election just 15 days away, what issues have come to the forefront in this campaign?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious the problems that every Wisconsinite is struggling with is 40-year high inflation. A dollar that you held at the start of the Biden administration is now worth only 88.3 cents. Record gasoline prices, they've backed down a little bit, but people need to understand that those gas prices are driven purposely higher because some people want to force Americans to get into an electric vehicle. The skyrocketing crime is a real issue, particularly in Milwaukee, but I think throughout the state people are pretty concerned about it. Our open border, not only do we have a flood of illegal immigrants, about 3 million people. Put that in perspective, that's a number larger than the population of 17 states. But how it primarily impacts Wisconsin is it's allowed a flood of deadly drugs. Local law enforcement used to worry about meth labs. Don't have to do that anymore because those meth labs have been put out of business by the drug trafficking coming out of Mexico. And of course, it's that methamphetamine, it's fentanyl that are killing our citizens. So these are the issues Wisconsinites are grappling with, but I think something even more fundamental is concerning Wisconsinites. Certainly as I traveled around the state after we started opening up from COVID, people would be coming up to me, literally tears welling up in their eyes, or sometimes streaming down their cheeks, concerned about what is happening to our country, that we're losing it. So much was exposed during COVID. Parents started seeing what was happening to our children, the indoctrination, things like critical race theory, the sexualization of our children, pushing a transgender agenda on our children. It's not what you do to young children. So certainly people from a conservative bent, conservative side of the political spectrum are highly concerned about what is happening to our country. We've seen Venezuela, by the way, we've seen the population of Venezuela vote themselves into poverty. Ronald Reagan said, freedom is just one generation away from being lost. We have to fight for that freedom. We have to recognize what made this country great. It's not big government. What it really is people like you that get up every day, go to work, and contribute. And they use what I always call that one essential ingredient, freedom, to dream and aspire and build and create not only a good life for yourself and your family, but create this marvel that we call America. And it is a marvel. There's nothing like America in the span of human history. No country has ever created this type of opportunity, this level of prosperity, this level of affluence. And I think it was such a shame as too many of our fellow citizens don't really appreciate what we have here, that they don't understand the poverty, the turmoil, the deprivation that occurs around the rest of the world. We've got a pretty good thing going here. We got problems that need to be fixed, no doubt about it. We don't need to fundamentally transform this nation. We don't need to look for a different form of economic model like socialism. That always fails. Like Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism, at some point you always run out of other people's money. And like I said, that's exactly the path that Venezuela went down, Cuba, Soviet Union. It doesn't work. I don't know why anybody in this country would ever look to embrace it. But anyway, those are what's on Wisconsinites' minds. Again, that fundamental, we love this country. We know how good it is. We're concerned we're losing it. And of course, they're being crushed by inflation, high gas prices, can't fill up the gas tank, can't fill up the grocery cart.
If elected, how will you work to represent the people of central Wisconsin?
One thing pretty unique about me in Washington, D.C., and it's unfortunate this is unique, there just aren't many people serving in the bureaucracies, within the executive branch, staff members, or quite honestly, even members of Congress, that have any experience in, which means very little knowledge of, and probably even more problematic is no sympathy for the private sector. I come from a relatively small business background. I was in some big mega corporation. Small little startup manufacturing company that just grew over 30 years and became a global player to a certain extent. But it's that unique perspective. So many people in Washington D.C. think business is easy. It's not. It's very difficult. It's not easy even thinking of a product or service that somebody wants to buy from you, much less be able to produce it or provide it at a cost less than you can sell it for, so you can make a profit, so you can continue to stay in business, so you can provide good paying jobs. That's a hard thing to do. And the federal government makes it even harder. And so it's that perspective I bring to Washington, D.C., so I can help small business, so I can help our economy grow. And by the way, if you take a look at the problems we face in this nation, the number one component of a solution is economic growth. We have to grow our economy. That's how you create good paying jobs. We've just experienced 2 quarters of negative growth while we're suffering under 8.2% inflation. That's not good. That has to be fixed. And I have the experience and knowledge on what needs to be done. We need to stop the massive, out-of-control deficit spending. We have to be concerned about our $31 trillion in debt. We need to figure out how are we going to grow our labor force. I just came from up north. They can't find people to work. That's a real problem. We've got a recession, classically defined, negative economic growth, and yet we have low unemployment. Could it be that the fact that we don't have enough workers could be contributing to that recession? We're not thinking of that enough. So again, I think what I bring to the table here, Dave, is I have the background of the private sector. I understand it. I worked in it. I mean, one of the reasons I stepped up to the plate and bucked my party under Republican tax reform is because I knew about pass-through entities. A lot of my colleagues didn't even know what a pass-through entity was. I had to explain it to them. They had no idea they're going to leave 95% of American businesses behind in tax reform. I'm the guy, single-handedly, that got that tax cut. So again, I'll continue that exact same approach. Plus, I bring a private sector attitude toward government. The problem with politics today is it's so divisive. I mean, aren't you getting tired of the anger and division? I am. But in politics, politicians exploit the divisions. What I've done, why I've succeeded, is I focus on the areas of agreement. In the private sector, you don't get very far by arguing all the time. You try and find areas of agreement. I've got a product, you want to buy it? No, we can haggle over the price. So that's the exact same attitude. That's how I was able to pass 300 pieces of legislation as Chairman of Homeland Security. It's that kind of attitude that we're going to need if we're going to unify and heal this nation. That is what I'm dedicated to doing. So what President Biden set out as a goal in his inaugural address, he's done the exact opposite. He's become the divider in chief. We need to unify and heal this nation.
Picking up on your last comment, what are your plans to overcome partisanship and create an environment where productivity is restored in government?
Well, I kind of addressed in the first answer. You know, if I am reelected, and I am asking for your vote, I will do everything I can to make things better. It's a manufacturer's attitude. You know, in manufacturing, there's a concept called continuous improvement. You're not going to save the entire world. You're not going to make things perfect. But you look at a situation and go, well, how can I make it better today versus where it was? I mean, I think that's a key component. But one of the things we need to do, and I just talked about this on a Sunday morning show yesterday, is we are completely dysfunctional in Congress. This is another year, and I haven't gone through the math in terms of how many appropriation bills we've actually brought up on the floor in regular order to debate, offer amendments, take votes, and then pass them. Since I've been there, 12 cycles, maybe a handful, if even. This year, once again, didn't bring up one. And by the way, this is a bipartisan problem. This isn't just a Democrat problem. This is a bipartisan problem. This year, we didn't bring up one appropriation bill. We end up at the end of the fiscal year, which ends on September 30th, and they pass a large continuing resolution. They end up having it expire right before Christmas, which puts a lot of pressure on members who just want to get out of town. They want to spend Christmas Eve with their loved ones. And that's how this has become so dysfunctional. So what's going to happen now right before Christmas, you're going to get a multi-1,000-page bill. It's going to spend hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion more. Nobody's going to have a chance to read it. It's going to be the Christmas tree. It's going to be all these ornaments hung on top of it. So we have to end that process. So what I've called on, if we win and we have the majority, I've called on Republican congressional leader to return function to the federal government. And the function I have in mind is pass a budget early in the year that will guide an appropriation process for the next fiscal year. Now, we're going to do everything we can to balance that budget, but it's so massive right now, if you're not able to balance the budget, you're going to have to increase the debt ceiling. But you increase the debt ceiling and you use it the way it was meant to be used. You attach fiscal controls. I've got 4 bills in mind. The Preventing Government Shutdown Act, that's a bill I passed out of my committee twice, never got a real vote on the Senate floor. All it does is it does what Wisconsin does. If there's dysfunction, you don't fund government or you don't fund an agency, you don't shut it down. You spend it last year's level. Doesn't that make sense? That's what we do in Wisconsin. So that'd be one bill, Preventing Government Shutdown Act. The full faith and credit, so nobody ever has to worry about our federal government defaulting on its debt. The next one is the REINS Act. Higher hurdle for major regulations, which crush businesses. And the final one is a bill I authored and introduced with Mick Mulvaney in 2012, reducing the size of the federal government through Attrition Act. You don't have to fire anybody, just don't hire anybody, including 87,000 new IRS agents. So once you've gone through that process, then you bring up appropriation bills. I would start in April. I would do it based on priority. Talk about what's the top priority. I personally bring up defense. It's mentioned 8 times in the Constitution. It's the top priority of the federal government. Bring up defense, debate it, open up for amendment, and then vote. And then bring up the next appropriation bill, probably Veterans Affairs, then maybe HHS, but bring them up. Make sure that all the appropriation bills are brought up the floor, debated, and voted on. That would return function to the federal government. It would, give us that muscle memory that we've lost in terms of how you really do fund the federal government without all this high level of dysfunction. I think we might be amazed, Dave, at how members might start getting along a little bit better and offer unanimous consent so that you can actually bring up amendments without having the clock run. So that's my concept. That's what I'm going to be pushing.
Well, Senator, we'd like to thank you for your time this evening, and let's give Senator Johnson a round of applause for participating.
Thank you, Dave.
Tonight's
Have a good day. Take care.
Good luck on November 8th. Staying with our federal races, we'd like to move to the congressional race for District Number 7. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Richard Dick Ausman. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Ausman, thank you for joining us. Please take the next 5 minutes and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your platform.
Sounds great. I am sure none of you are aware of me, so I'm going to give you a little background here. Currently live in Lac du Flambeau, but I was born and raised in Merrill. My life experiences were formulated in a large part, by when I was 7, my dad passed away. No insurance, no savings. This is Merrill. My mom worked at Strand's department store. She picked up selling Avon products. We got our food in white boxes from the county building. She baked bread. I delivered it around the neighborhood, and she rented out my sister's bedroom to a student at the teacher's college to make ends meet. She defined who I am, make it happen. That is what has really defined my life. If you know people from the Depression, like my stepdad, that's what defined him. Work-wise, I had probably my first job when I was 5 or 6 years old, helped my brother with his paper route. Great part is when I didn't want to go, I didn't have to. Did the things like I started mowing yards in the 4th grade and delivered newspapers, and got my first job at 16 bussing tables at South of the Border restaurant. And I've always worked. It's just part of what you did to make things happen. I attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I had the greatest time of my life because I was a member of the UW marching band. I was a bass drummer. I am the only person you are ever going to meet that has done complete somersaults strapped to a bass drum. It is not meant to be done. I did it 4 times the first year. Second year got stitches the first try, second time made it, and third time, if you get close to me, that's why I have a hole in my head. So not meant to be done, but I've done the things that people told me I can't do. My work life has been publishing. I needed to make money in Madison, and I picked up a job delivering newspapers for the struggling weekly student newspaper. When I left that newspaper 8 years later, it was the 20th largest daily newspaper in the state of Wisconsin by circulation. All the editors were paid salaries. They didn't have to work other places. They could focus on what their future was, which was being a journalist. I left Madison and I moved to Milwaukee, and I wanted to stay in publishing. I wasn't going to follow I got a BBA, a Bachelor of Business Administration. It's in marketing, but I wasn't going to go the corporate route. I loved publishing. That's what I'd been doing. And Milwaukee was one of the few major cities that didn't have an alternative weekly. So I moved to Milwaukee, and I started the alternative weekly there. Within 3 years, we won the Milwaukee Press Club Award for Best Feature Writing in the state of Wisconsin. To me, it's always been about the quality of what you do. We beat every newspaper in this state, including the Sentinel Journal, Wausau Daily Herald, all the others. I then went into business-to-business publishing, and I became a leading executive in one of the largest publishing companies in the world. My publications were Training Magazine. It was the leading magazine in this country, helping companies, entities figure out how to develop their workforce to the greatest extent. I also published Presentations Magazine. It was the leading magazine on communications in this country. And I also created Russian and Japanese language editions of that publication. It was a great time. Russians, I spoke a little bit, they spoke a little English. Japanese, not so much, had to use a translator. But I sort of figure out that, like, with that experience, it'll sort of help me with working with Republicans, because maybe we won't speak the same language, but we'll be able to get things done. So I also published the largest group of meetings and events magazines in the country, and I had just bought, I had left the corporate world after the pandemic, or prior to it, and I was about to start my own publishing company. I had invested quite a bit in 2 brands. And then I realized that Tiffany was going to run unopposed, and that's why I'm standing in front of you here today. You know, also, well, my life has been I'm an independent. You know, when I decided to run, I knew I wouldn't win as an independent. I don't know where the Republican Party's gone, and you know, what I found out is I lined up pretty neatly with the Democrats. And so, but you also have to understand my background, because I grew up in the Republican Party. Our best friends of our family, my mom remarried when I was 11. And my stepdad sold all the fire and police equipment through this district, including here, Stevens Point north to Hurley, east to Crandon west. Our friends were all Republicans. My dad's first cousin was Laverne Ausman. He was Secretary of the Agriculture of Wisconsin, Republican. Head of the United States Farm Administration Bureau, Republican, 2-time Assemblyman, Republican. He recently passed away, but family reunion a couple years ago, 3 years ago, 4, I asked him, what do you make of what's going on today? And he said, all I can say is it's the first time I didn't vote Republican for president. You know, I don't care about the party. I'm here to represent everybody. I've been part of all the parties now. My only care is for the citizens of the 7th Congressional District.
Thank you for that introduction. With the 2022 fall elections just 15 days away, what issues have come to the forefront in your campaign?
Well, you listen to the news, and number one, it's inflation. But what bothers me is when you hear that it's Biden's fault. And that's basically the story. You know, it's Biden's fault. Or Sumner said, you know, if you pass this other benefits package, well, the one that Trump signed before was far greater than that. There's 3 cataclysmic things that have happened to our country recently. Number one, we've had a pandemic that we haven't experienced in more than 100 years. We all know how the country shut down. And out of that came cataclysmic event number 2, in that a lot of people haven't returned to work again. A lot of them have started their own private businesses. A lot of baby boomers just decided, you know, life's too short, and so they're doing different things. Our supply chains they're in havoc. You know, there's still ships sitting off the ports right now waiting to unload. I was up in Minocqua earlier this year, and a guy's unloading the stuff in his store that he bought over a year ago. You know, so, and then cataclysmic event number 3, Russia invades the sovereign nation of Ukraine. Oil prices skyrocket. You know, everything outside of if you're wearing silk or cotton or there's a metal, everything is made from fossil fuels. Plastics are all made from fossil fuels. When the price of fossil fuels go up, the cost of everything else goes up. There's also something going on. You have a labor shortage, and now companies are also they're paying more to get workers. I was really heartened. I was at a parade in North Hudson, and the Quick Trip had a sign on it, starting wage of $19, $20 an hour. I'm like, we're finally there. This is a wage that someone can live upon and have kids. And but guess what? That $19 to $20 an hour is going to cycle through the system, and again result in higher wages or higher inflation. But we've been through this. If you lived through the 70s, 18% mortgages, the gasoline, the waits at the lines. We've been through this as Americans. We will go through it. It's not the blame of a president. It's just the circumstances that we're in right now, far beyond the reach or what anyone can do to make a huge difference. He's released petroleum reserves, things like that. But, you know, it just makes a dent. We have to work our way through this. Also, crime. You know, again, my stepdad sold all the fire and police equipment. I'm not here to defund the blue. They are our best friends. But I also, back then, I remember being 13, 14, hearing one of our friends who was a state patrol officer in the Minocqua area talk about how every time he approached someone, a car, he was fearful. and he actually quit a few years later. You know, we don't pay these folks enough. Every time they approach someone, they're putting themselves in danger. And we don't have enough right now. A lot of them have quit. So, you know, you can blame it on a lot of things, but we also need to have more law enforcement out there. We need to pay them well, and we need to equip them to address the threats that they face these days with the types of weapons and things that, you know, that are out there. So, and then, let's see, what else do we hear about? Let's see, crime. Well, what I want to do, what I've found out, I put over 26,000 miles on my truck and bus since I started this. And what I found out is what the people are really concerned about. Number one is health care. They are concerned about health care. 58% of all American debt is medical debt. We can do better for our children and the future generations. The other thing they're concerned about is Social Security. You know, those that aren't getting it really don't believe that it's going to be there for them. Those who have it are afraid their benefits are going to be cut. You know, Social Security can be solved in one fall swoop. Most folks don't know that when someone currently makes $147,000 a year, they stop contributing to the Social Security fund for the remainder of the year. Eliminate the cap on contributions and Social Security is immediately solved. It's that simple. The other thing they're concerned about, gun safety. With these miles I put on, I've been to so many fairs and farm events and stuff like that, and most of the folks I'm talking to are Republicans. They all agree with everything that I think we need to do. Again, I guess I came up Republican. But number one, you don't need more than 5 bullets in a clip. No one takes more than 1 or 2. I own guns. I'm not here to take away guns, but no one fires more than 1 or 2 bullets when they're hunting. You know, if there was a limit on the number of bullets in a clip, it would give people a chance to fight back, run away, do something when they're caught in these situations. And I'm open to giving a permit, just like you can't have an automatic weapon, but you can get one to own an automatic weapon. You can get a permit to own a clip with more bullets if you really think someone's going to invade the country and you need that 50 to 100 bullets. And then universal background checks. We need that. We need red flag laws. When someone's deemed a legal danger to themselves or others, we need to remove their weapon. When they're no longer a legal danger to themselves or others, they get it back. And number 4, if someone buys a gun for the first time, they don't know that there's something called a safety. They don't know you don't leave a bullet in the chamber. They don't know you walk with the muzzle pointed down. You have to take a gun safety course. That was given to me by a Republican because I didn't realize that you didn't have to do that anymore. Those 4 things, everybody agrees on it. Doesn't matter the political party. Let's move it forward. And number 4, you know, women's rights is a much bigger issue, but the Equal Rights Amendment's been ratified by 3/4 of the states. That's a rule. And 38 states have done it. It's time to make the Equal Rights Amendment a part of our Constitution. I refuse to believe that any woman is any less a citizen than a man in this country, and this needs to be corrected.
Thank you very much. If elected, how will you work to represent the people of Central Wisconsin?
I will vote for their best interests. A reason I got into this is because Tiffany's votes are actually hurting people. He's voted against lowering the cost of insulin. He voted against the infant formula funding bill. He voted against Medicare being able to negotiate prescription drug prices. He voted against our veterans twice. He voted against the Honoring Our Pact Act to help them with their exposure to toxic substances, and that's every generation. It's burn pits, it's Agent Orange, it's radiation, it's poisoning on our camps and bases like Lejeune and Pearl Harbor. He voted against helping these folks. He just recently was one of 49 GOP congresspeople that voted against a bill that would help the veterans with their hunger needs and nutritional needs. He says, you know, back the blue, makes me want to throw up. He just voted against the community policing bill that would give every community in this district with 125 or fewer employees funds to retain and hire new law enforcement. That's what we need. The only ones I don't think that probably would have gotten it was probably Wausau and the Marathon County Sheriff's Department. Otherwise, throughout this entire district, 26 counties, we could have helped our law enforcement, and he voted against it. He's voted against aid for Ukraine. He wants to privatize Social Security. That is a horrible idea. And the thing that really gets me, he's missed 350% more votes than the average congressperson in the last Congress. He's paid a lot of money, and he's not showing up to do his job. Enough. You know, no one in this room could miss 350% more of their job than someone else and still have their job. And he seems to be on track for the same thing for this Congress. So, you know, it pretty much, you know, and the list goes on. And what really upsets me now is I'm seeing his pattern of lying. We've both been on these interviews. We were on the Western Wisconsin Journal television program, and he's telling the interviewer that he believes people should have access to contraceptives. He voted against the contraceptives bill, which would deny people access to contraceptives. We're both interviewed on the Wisconsin Public Radio Route 51 program. He's saying how he voted for more PFAS research in July. Well, it's July 2021, and he voted against the PFAS bill. And it wasn't just research, it was actually doing something about it. And everybody here in Wausau should be concerned about it because you have PFAS in your wells, as does Rhinelander, and now we know Marshfield does as well. And then he goes around the state telling people that critical race theory is being taught in our schools. And a teacher went up to him and said, "Would you please tell me which school this is being taught in? I'll get it to you." Didn't get anything. Saw him at another event. "I'll get it to you." Didn't get anything. Called his office. Didn't get anything. At the Polk County Fair this last summer, he sees him again, and he's like, "You said you were going to send me where critical race theory has been taught in our schools. Please tell me." And in front of others, Tom blurts out, "I lied." That is not what we should expect of our representatives. It's not acceptable. You know, we've been through a time when we're at a debate in Minocqua a few weeks ago, and out of his mouth comes that fentanyl is the number one leading cause of death, is the number one cause of death in Oneida County. Someone came up to me with their phone at the halftime or whatever, and it's way down the list. Number one is cancer and heart disease, but he talks about it just like he's breathing. That's not acceptable. You know, and it just goes on. I have more examples of it, but, you know, we can't accept that I will always tell you the truth. It may not be, you know, I'm First Amendment. I am all about the truth. You know, and so another part of it is also, you know, a big part is immigration, you know, of what's being talked about. I looked at it because we had an interview. I listened to his old interviews, and you know, he also voted against expanding rural broadband access. If you live in the 7th north of Wausau, see what it's like to get broadband access. But he talks about immigration, and when I looked at it, it goes like this: the attempts of illegal immigration. The least amount of illegal immigration attempts we ever had was during the Obama administration. It's not to be political. All I'm going to say is whatever they were doing then, we better figure it out and do it again. You know, there was something going on there that we had the lowest amount of attempted illegal immigration. And I even am out there listening to Senator Johnson talk about all the drugs coming in. No, they're catching them. That's why we know what the numbers are. Most of the drugs come through legal checkpoints coming into the United States. So, you know, immigration it's just a boogeyman thing. And we do need to fix it. But again, let's look back to since 2000 when we had the most successful program.
Thank you very much. So what is your plan to overcome partisanship and create an environment where productivity is restored in government?
For the partisanship, again, putting 26,000 miles, looked at it again, on the truck and bus, since I started this, you know, you can talk about the issues, but what I've heard from people more than anything is they want their legislators to work together. They want compromise. They are tired of just one side saying the other side is horrible and the other side saying the other side is horrible, and nothing happens. I remember growing up in the Republican Party when, you know, it was more about big business versus social programs. That's what the hot button issues were. But you know what? They compromised. Everybody gave up a little bit to move something forward. And that's what we need to get back to. That's what people are yearning for. They want decency. They want people telling the truth. You know, bipartisanship also is my opponent, Tiffany, when he was a state senator. I was talking to Jeff Smith. He's a senator out in the northern part of the 3rd District. Never met him, just having a fun conversation. He was telling me how everybody after sessions would go down in the bars in Madison and drink together and stuff like that. That does not happen anymore. In fact, then I was traveling with Governor Evers, and I heard him tell the story about how when he was first elected, he had a card game at the governor's mansion, welcomed everybody, come and play cards. One Republican showed up, and that Republican was threatened that if he showed up, that was not going to be good for him, and it wasn't, because they then refused to advance any of his bills from that point moving forward, because he wanted to play a game of cards with the governor. You know, there's 6 siblings. There's 6 of us in my family. 3 voted for Trump twice. 3 of us didn't. I didn't stop playing cards with them because, you know, we still enjoyed playing cards together. You know, so we need to get back to working together. What also bothers me is your incumbent, Tiffany. Jeff was telling me about, he was on a part of a group, they called themselves the terrorists. And the point of it was they would put their lawmakers in such terror that there was no way that they would talk to the other side or vote for a bill that was not from the Republican Party. That is not partisanship. And it's not funny to be called a terrorist, and they wore it around like a badge. I find it pretty sad. You know, another thing that, you know, for bipartisanship is you got to work with everybody. And I live in Lac du Flambeau. I live on the reservation. I've had a year-round home there for 25 years. I admire the culture greatly. It's about Mother Earth. You know, we ruin the earth, and it doesn't matter what else we've done because there's no place to go. So, and yet you have 6 bands of the Ojibwa Nation in this district, plus the Potawatomi. He has never gone to one single tribal council meeting to ask them, what can I do for you? And they are 2% of the population of this district. You are supposed to represent everyone. And again, that is what I plan to do. There's no politics to it for me. Everybody is important to me. And I will go and represent everybody's interests.
Thank you very much, and please join me in thanking you for being here this evening.
Was that all the questions? Okay. Thank you. On Wisconsin.
And now please join me in welcoming Congressman Tiffany to the stage. Congressman Tiffany, thank you for joining us this evening. Please take the next 5 minutes and introduce yourself and your platform.
Well, good evening, everyone. It is great to be here. And first of all, big thank you to the Wausau Chamber of Commerce for hosting this evening. The business leadership group here in the Wausau area really appreciate having the opportunity to be able to be here tonight. I'll start back at the beginning. I grew up on a dairy farm in western Wisconsin, a little town, Elmwood, Wisconsin. I have 7 siblings and went off to college to UW River Falls, got an agricultural degree there, and put that to work for 7.5 years in southern Minnesota. I worked for a farm supply cooperative down in Plainview, Minnesota. And after that, I moved to the Great Northwoods a little over 30 years ago now, and moved up to the Minocqua area. That's where I met my wife. And we owned and operated Wilderness Cruises for 20 years. We were business owners for all that time. And we have 3 daughters. Bittersweet time this fall. Our last one, we are now empty nesters. So, but a great experience being able to show people a wonderful time those 20 years out on the Willow Flowage. And I was also the dam tender on the Willow Flowage. Yes, I was a dam man. And I only have one regret about this job, that you have given me the great privilege to serve you in Washington, D.C. I had to give up my dam job. So, but it's my business background and also raising a family here in Wisconsin that led me to run for public office. In 2010, I ran for state assembly and served 1 term in the state assembly and then served nearly 8 years in the state senate. One of the main reasons that I ran for public office is that in 2010, we had a $3 billion deficit here in Wisconsin. We also had 10% in unemployment. Our state was in a bad place. And we went down to Madison and made the tough decisions to turn things around. And many of you remember them well from a decade ago. Those are not easy decisions that were made, but they put Wisconsin in a much better place. Where you look at Wisconsin's budget now, it's in the black, largest rainy day fund. I helped write 3 of those budgets before I left to go to Congress. And so now, serving in Congress for a little over 2 years, elected in a special election of May of 2020, the same things animate me. Let's make sure we have good jobs for people. Let's make sure the government is spending within its means, that we do have a balanced budget. Let's make sure that we make America the greatest country on earth, which we have been for over 200 years. Let's do all those things, and I believe we do that by protecting the Constitution and making sure that we do follow the Constitution. You all know what the problems are out there in America at this point. The record inflation, record high cost of living, record high energy prices, record illegal border crossings, record crime, and we have men setting records in girls' sports now. A wrecking ball has been taken to America, and it's time to change that. And we can do that. And it will not, all it takes is the will to do it. It is not that hard, because these are tried and true principles. If we follow, we can do that. For example, in regards to inflation, all we have to do is go back to balanced budgets. I belong to a group in Washington, D.C., the Republican Study Committee, that put forward the only detailed balanced budget of any group out in Washington, D.C. this year. It gets to balance in 7 years. We need to reward work rather than welfare. We must encourage people to work, and we have to get to energy independence. We do those things. I mean, we had energy independence just a couple years ago. We now have a president that goes over to Saudi Arabia and begs them to produce more oil, when all you have to do is just ask the American people, and they will produce that oil. We do those 3 things, and we'll be quickly back to prosperity, and we'll be able to wring inflation out of the system. It is time to secure our border. What's going on is a national security threat. Information just came out today showing the highest number of terrorist interdictions that we've seen in the history of our country down on the southern border. You see fentanyl coming in record amounts. The Wisconsin Department of Health Services has now said that fentanyl is a public health emergency. That's as a result of securing our border. And we have record trafficking of humans that's going on in America. You saw earlier this year, 53 people coming across the border being trafficked were fried to death in the back of a trailer near San Antonio, Texas. It is time for us to secure the border. And it's also time for us to get a hold of crime here in America. I've introduced a bill. I mean, first of all, we need to respect the police. We need to stop the defund the police movement. But we also need prosecutors that will prosecute. And I have introduced a bill to bring integrity back to that system. Because you're seeing it play out right in Waukesha County today, as we are seeing with the trial down in Waukesha County, where 6 people were killed as a result of somebody out on low bail, a prosecutor not doing their job. We have to get back to that here in America, to have a safe, strong, free America.
Thank you for that introduction. With the 2022 fall election just 15 days away, what issues have come to the forefront in your campaign?
Yeah, so I was just rattling off the issues that I think are preeminent, and I will repeat them. We have the cost of living going through the roof. We have record high energy prices. We have record illegal border crossings. We have record crime. And I would add another thing. We have a foreign policy that is in shambles in America at this point. If you want to know when Vladimir Putin, who, by the way, I am sanctioned by the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin, if you want to know why he was so emboldened, all you have to do is go back to January 20th of 2021, President Biden's first day in office. His very first action was to shut down the Keystone Pipeline. And then he has continued from there to shut down drilling on public lands. We have the lowest number of permits that have been issued since World War II on our public lands. His Securities and Exchange Commission is trying to suppress lenders from being able to lend to companies that produce fossil fuels. It has been a full court press to shut down our fossil fuel industry here in America. Vladimir Putin and other tyrants around the world, they saw that. They saw it for the weakness that it is here in America. Well, that was reinforced just a couple months later, after January 20th of 2021, when President Biden removed the sanctions on the Nord Stream pipeline that runs from Russia to Europe. Those sanctions had been put in place by the previous administration. And then what made it very clear to our adversaries around the world that America was going to be weak is the debacle in Afghanistan. That will forever be a blight on our foreign policy and our military here in America. 13 of our finest died at the gates of the Kabul airport, being left behind. We left at least $85 billion of the most advanced war material behind in Afghanistan. You don't think the Chinese are in Afghanistan at this point, checking all of that out and stealing our technology that we use for some of our most advanced weaponry? That debacle in Afghanistan put an exclamation point on the tyrants of the world, to the tyrants of the world, that we were going to be a weak America. And that's what we have at this point. And our adversaries see that. And it should be of deep concern to all of you out there that that is how America is perceived at this point. Why is China emboldened to be flying over Taiwan on a regular basis, threatening them? The 21st century, I'll back up a second. The 20th century, I think, is undoubtedly an American century. We became preeminent in the world. And we were a great country standing up for freedom for other countries around the world. All you have to do is look at the fall of the Soviet Union at the end of the 1980s. Is the 21st century going to be an American century? Or is it going to be a Chinese century? That really, in my estimation, is the big question before us for those of us that have the responsibility for that foreign policy. If we're going to have a weak America, just like we had in the 1970s through this decade, tyrants like President Xi of China, who just reinforced his grip on power in China over the last week via the Communist Party, they're going to go after American preeminence. And the question is, do we want the people of this world to live in a totalitarian world, or do we want them to live in a free world? Because that's what we fought for in the 20th century. And I believe that's what we should work for here in the 21st century. But that only happens if America is strong.
If elected, how will you work to represent the people of central Wisconsin?
From the day I took office, let's see, special election was May 12, 2020. A week later, I was sworn in on May 19th of 2020, a little over 2 years ago. Me and my staff, we have been dedicated to do the work for the people here of the 7th Congressional District. And that starts by good constituent service. That is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, that we do for you every day. My staff out in Washington, D.C., and especially my staff here in the 7th Congressional District in northern Wisconsin, They work every day to make sure they live up to that commitment to serve you, whether it's an IRS issue, whether it's a veterans issue, or like we have right now up in the northwest corner of the state, a post office issue. We dedicate ourselves to doing the best job possible to make sure that we're fulfilling that commitment to represent you and make sure that the federal government is hearing, that they are hearing your concerns. We had a success almost immediately about a year ago when the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program was being put in place. That was to help farmers make it through that very difficult time when markets were being shut down for them, and we had these wild gyrations in the marketplace in terms of prices and things like that. We had two segments of the agriculture industry that were not originally on the list that would qualify for the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. One of them being the mink producers, which we are one of the largest, if not the largest, mink producing regions in the United States right here, and ginseng growers. And as I suspect all of you know here, ginseng in the United States, it's growing right here in north central Wisconsin. We got them qualified to be able to, for the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, so that they would be able to stay in business. Without that, they probably would not have stayed in business. We made the point to the previous administration that those people should qualify for that, and we made sure that we got that done. Another thing that we've been working on that is vitally important to this congressional district, we have one of the major ports on the Great Lakes that's in this district, and that's in Superior, the twin ports of Superior and Duluth. And there is a significant boat manufacturer, perhaps you could even say ship manufacturer, that is up there. And working with my colleague, Pete Stauber from Duluth on the Minnesota side, we have been able to get them qualified to be able to accept some government contracts for defense projects. And we've worked diligently to try to make that happen, and we were able to get that inserted into a bill so that they would benefit from that. Because you see, most of the work at this point is done on the major ports that are on oceans, and we believe that some of that can be done at some of the Great Lakes ports, especially in Superior, where Fraser Shipyards is a major business that does that type of work.
And what are your plans to overcome partisanship and create an environment where productivity is restored in government?
Yeah, so I've introduced a bill with both Republican and Democrat colleagues to remove most favored nation status from China. Most favored nation status, which was put in place about 20 years ago, allows the administration or the executive branch to just decide how they're going to carry that out. I believe we should return that to oversight from Congress, and I believe it should be an annual vote. I would go back to my question in regards to the significant issues that are before us, the answer that I gave in regards to China. China cheats. They use our universities, they use our research institutions to steal our technology. We pay billions of dollars. You participate in that with the tax dollars that you put into places like UW-Madison, our UW system, which is one of the preeminent research universities here in the United States. Well, technology is being stolen out of our universities by the Chinese Communist government. We've seen what they've done to their neighbors. Hong Kong was once free. It is no longer free. They have made it very clear they expect to take Taiwan back. The Chinese are very aggressive at this point, and we need to make sure that, that they are good actors. I introduced that bill with both Republicans and Democrats, and I'm hopeful that we can bring that decision back to the Congress and that decision be made every year for most favored nation status, because it brings significant benefits to a country like China. I've introduced numerous bills in this session of Congress, and Speaker Pelosi has not allowed any of them to have a hearing in committee. Now, first of all, there's a real breakdown in the process that's going out, what we would call regular order in Congress. It is one of the things that's been most surprising for me going from the state legislature to Congress is how regular order doesn't work, how the budgeting process doesn't work. We have such a good budget process here in the state of Wisconsin. And it's broken down because it's not being used properly. Speaker Nancy Pelosi has refused. I would like to have some of my bills be able to go to those committees, to have hearings, to be marked up, to be amended if people think they have better ideas as far as how they could be improved. But she has chosen to take a partisan approach. She has chosen to take a partisan approach to this legislative session because my colleagues are in the same boat. Our bills are very rarely put forward to be able to have hearings. If we're going to have bipartisanship, it needs to be practiced. It needs to be practiced on both sides. I think back to my days in the legislature. I worked with people extensively. My opponent alluded to a vote in regards to broadband. And part of the reason I voted against a broadband bill at the federal level is because it was loaded up with all kinds of other stuff that has led to the debt that we have, that's led to the high cost of living and inflation. I'm not going to vote for bills that are going to spend billions, if not trillions of dollars, that are going to lead to the inflation that is hitting every one of you in your pocketbook. For you wage earners out there, you have lost the equivalent of 1 month's pay as a result of inflation this year. 8.3%? That's 1 month's pay you've lost because of inflation. I will not vote for legislation that is going to continue the borrowing and printing of money at the federal level that, if it is not stopped, is going to get us into deeper and deeper trouble. So I am willing to work with anyone on either side of the aisle on the issues that I find of great importance. But I'm also not going to compromise my principles, which are based on the Constitution of the United States of America, that we shall respect free speech, that we will respect the Second Amendment, that we believe in limited government. Our federal government, and many of these bills that have passed through the decades, they are well-intentioned, ladies and gentlemen. But have they actually served the purpose of limited government? We should bring control back to you, the state, local level, but in particular to you, the individual. That's what our guarantee was at the founding, is individual liberty. That was the guarantee we were given in the Constitution. And I would like to vote in a bipartisan manner, but I will not vote for what undermines our fundamental constitutional freedoms. I will vote for what protects your individual rights every day. Let's make America strong, safe, and free once again. I hope to earn your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Congressman Tiffany for participating in tonight's forum. This forum will now turn to our representation at the state level. We want to start with the state Senate race for District number 29. With that, I'd like to welcome to the stage Mr. Bob Look. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Bob Look. Mr. Look, thank you for joining us tonight. Please take the next 5 minutes and introduce yourself and your platform.
5 minutes for that? Well, my name is Bob Look, and a little bit about myself. Longtime broadcaster, well over 40 years in the broadcast business. First came to the Wausau area in 1988 when I was hired out of Peoria, Illinois to become a program director for a brand new country music station. You might have heard of it, WDEZ. And so I guess I'm the father of WDEZ, but we were brought here to put it on the air in the country because of, before it was an easy listening station. This is the city where I met my wife. And late in 1991, I got a great opportunity to move out to South Dakota to work for a broadcast company for a brand new radio station that they wanted to put up there. And the two gentlemen who were the owners, it was called Tom Communication. One of the gentlemen was the general manager. His name was Tom Kearns, and his college buddy, who was part of the ownership, was Tom Brokaw. So I knew one thing: my checks were not going to bounce. So that was a good thing to move out there. My wife and myself, we spent 8 years in South Dakota, and then I heard of the passing of longtime TV and radio personality here in the Wausau area. Howard Gronetsky had passed away. And I had worked with Howard and Rosemary in Milwaukee radio back in the early to mid 80s. So I kind of knew him and when I was in with WDEZ. And I just contacted the company that owned the station and wanted to pass my condolences on to Rosemary. And the next thing you know, they asked me, would you like to come back to Wausau? I said, well, for what? I didn't have no idea what he was talking about. But they were looking for somebody to do the morning show on WSAU back in 1998. And of course, I mentioned that to my wife, and she went, ooh, going back home. So we did that. And in April of 98, I came here and was the host of the morning show at WSAU for a couple of years. And I've been working in radio throughout Milwaukee to Madison and throughout other parts of the state. I've done hundreds and hundreds of high school football, basketball, baseball, hockey games, also college sports. I also did professional sports. A long career with the broadcast business. Why I'm getting involved into politics is kind of a simple equation, and that is we're supposed to do that if we feel like adding our voice. We're supposed to be represented by citizens. And it was brought up to my attention that nobody was running for the state senate in the Democratic Party. And I says, well, I didn't plan to do this. I mean, I'm quite happy with my retirement and living my life. But they came and said, we were going to help you get on the ballot. I says, well, if you get me on the ballot, I'll run. And I will do the best I can. And they also don't realize that my competitive nature from playing sports and in the competitive world of commercial radio, that you kind of have a little mean streak in you. You really are competitive. And so when I came on board, I says, well, now that you got me on the ballot, you're going to get a person who's going to take this seriously. And I am taking this very seriously. I believe this is an opportunity for us to finally let the common sense majority take over again. That's what I want to bring to the job as a state senator for District 29. I am a good friend to the current state senator, who is a Republican, but Senator Jerry Petrusky and I, we met on the night he became an assemblyman-elect in 1998. I was the first person to interview him as the assemblyman-elect back in that election. And we've been friends ever since. Now, he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. We don't agree with everything. But I believe we can disagree and not be disagreeable. That is the main problem that I see right now with whether it's in Madison, whether it's in Washington, D.C. The point is, pointing your finger and saying, I'm right, you're wrong, is getting us nowhere. And one thing that I have learned over my years of broadcasting and dealing with a lot of people from different backgrounds and different persuasions is that you're going to learn a lot more by listening than you are by talking. And I want to emphasize again, listening more than talking. And I have said this from the start of this campaign, I do not view my opponent as the enemy, and I never will. We're all trying to do the best we can, and that's why I am running for the state senate and want to be your senator in Madison.
Thank you for that introduction. With the 2022 fall election just 15 days away, what are the issues that have come to the forefront in your campaign?
Right now, a lot of people talking about inflation, but of course, this is inflation that is worldwide. It's not something that is totally exclusive to Wisconsin or totally exclusive to the United States. It's worldwide. My interpretation of inflation is a little bit different than most people, and that is it's pretty much a corporate greed grab. When you take a look at the oil companies and you look at the price of crude oil compared to before the inflation numbers went up, and when they get up, the cost per barrel is the same, if not less. But the companies just wrote in the last quarter like over $61 billion worth of profits, record numbers for them. And it just kind of goes past everybody like, oh, well, I guess they got lucky. No, they didn't get lucky. They took advantage of something. They took advantage of you, the consumer, and that just carries its way down the process. Transportation to get items from point A to point B. You can't get that done at the prices that you had before because of the cost of fuel. It all piles on to one another. It's like dominoes. Hit one, bop, 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 off you go. Until we start calling these organizations and businesses and individuals on the carpet this way, this is going to continue. This will always be the story. This is something that us as Americans have to take the bull by the horns. Sometimes it's not easy. You wonder, I'm just a simple citizen. What can I do? Well, that's what I mean about being a part of the common sense majority. When I go around talking to people in my district, and I introduce myself, and the first thing they'll say, oh, you're a Democrat. I says, yeah. And then we start talking about grandchildren, start talking about walleye fishing, we start talking about the Packers, we start talking about, and about 20 minutes goes by, and says, you realize you've been talking for 20 minutes, and we all have a lot of stuff in common, but because you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, does that mean that we have to point fingers, saying I'm right, you're wrong? Common sense, folks. I really believe in it because I believe that the people of Wisconsin, and I'm born and raised from the south side of Milwaukee, down in a very heavy Polish area. That's why I have my Polish and American flags on my lapels. I think it's very important that we just lower the temperatures and let's talk to one another. Let's come to solutions together. I know that I've heard some politicians say, well, if a member of the opposite party proposes a bill, I'm going to vote it down immediately. You haven't even looked at it, haven't read it, haven't considered it, haven't debated it, and you're just going to vote it down just because it's an opposite party. That's no way for democracy, my friends. We can do better than that, and I believe we can. And that's why I'm running.
If elected, how will you work to represent the people of central Wisconsin?
I want to be accessible to everyone, whether you supported me or whether you did not support me. It makes no difference to me. If I'm elected to the state senate representing District 29, that means I represent the district, not my supporters, not my donors, and Lord knows I don't have many of those. Most of the donors I have are regular people like all of us with their $20, $15, $5 donation. If you want to see my staff, this is it. I don't have any handlers. I don't have any campaign manager. I don't have any media representative. Over 40 years of being involved in radio and the mass media, I pretty much can handle that on my own. But the point being, I'm in this as myself talking to the people of the Senate District 29. I want to hear from you. Because first of all, there may be an item that's up for debate, say in the state Senate. Some bill comes across. Now, maybe I took this side of the story, and this is part of the argument. And I'm pretty much on that side. Okay, now someone on the other side, we sit down, and they start telling me why they do not favor this bill. And they give me good reasons to consider this. My eyes, my experiences are not deep enough to know everything. And once you drop that wall and admit that there's other people out there who know more things or maybe have a different perspective, listen to them, evaluate it, and let's see if we can figure out a way to make this all work for both of us. Can be done. It has been done in the past, and I believe that it can be done again.
How do you plan to overcome partisanship and create an environment where productivity is restored in government?
Communication. That's what I'm doing here with you, talking to you. I want to hear from you. And the best part about it is we learn, both of us learn where we're coming from. If we want to make intelligent decisions, you've got to have all the information for anything. And you're talking about partisanship, and again, when you're coming out of the chutes already saying that if this is a Democratic bill, I'm not voting for it ever, where does partisanship go? You can't do that. You just can't do that and be a civilized society and a common sense type of a community. That's why I would like to be part of the Senate in the Madison. Maybe we need a few more of us.
Please join me in thanking Mr. Look for being here and participating in tonight's forum.
Thank you.
Oh, let's take a little breather. Feel free to stand up and stretch a little bit. And great. Thank you very much. Next up, we'd like to introduce our next candidate, Mr. Cory Tomczyk. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Tomczyk to the stage. Mr. Tomczyk, thanks for joining us this evening. Please take the next 5 minutes and introduce yourself and your platform.
Well, I was born right here in north central Wisconsin in the Rudolph, Wisconsin Rapids area. I've lived in Mosney since 1988. I'm 60 years old. I have 2 sons, 3 grandchildren. 32 years ago, I started my own business, IRO, and IRO is still going today. The Wausau community has given me much in my business life, and I'm thankful for that. Beyond just me, they've given people like me, other entrepreneurs, the ability to grow and take risks and to create a business. And that comes from a stable community, a safe community. Without those, business isn't going to start up and thrive. I'm unapologetically a conservative. I support Americans' right to bear arms. I support life from the point of conception. Boy, you think I'd have this practice, right? I support school choice and the principle of subsidiarity, which subsidiarity is the idea that people at the lowest level of government are the ones that are best suited to take care of a community's problems. I think that our local people and our local government are going to spend tax dollars far better than Madison or Washington, D.C. could ever hope to. I think that my positions align most closely with the people of the 29th Senate District. I think that's what propelled me through the primary. I think that's what's going to give me the opportunity to serve, to represent them come November 8th.
Thank you for that introduction. With the fall 2022 election just 15 days away, what issues have come to the forefront in your campaign?
Two things. The election process itself. People are still talking about that. I'm worried that we're becoming Putin's Russia or Chavez's Venezuela. It boggles my mind to think how we've treated the election process and our ballots, which are sacred and important in the life of America. I don't see any reason why we can't have same-day voting, paper ballots, and hand counts. The other issue is the integrity of our justice systems, or as I see today, the lack of integrity in our justice systems. If we're going to ignore what went on in the summer of 2020, the burning of businesses, the attack on the police, they tried to burn down a courthouse, for God's sake. If we excuse that, while at the same time sending SWAT teams to people's homes who are simply in Washington, D.C. to support their candidate, well, then we're vastly losing, quickly losing, the equal application of equity under the law, equality under the law. It's not funny. If we don't address these two issues immediately, then worrying about taxes and where our workforce is going to come from is frivolous. Having said that, public security, or public safety, economic security, education, and the radical politics that come out of the governor's office and come out of the mayor's office, all these things are upsetting to the average person in our area. All of these issues are being inflated, skewered, and just plain manipulated by the Democratic or the Democrat Party. From the president's ridiculous shutdown of the oil pipeline in his first day in office, and from Governor Evers' ridiculous and illegal shutdown of our state, Democrat leadership has purposely attacked our economic freedom and has done nothing to protect and support the average American. The liberal left demonizes the police, and yet again another example of their attack on safety and prosperity. It seems like every 6 months we hear about a pair of police officers being ambushed or really being executed in cold blood in their police car. They're just trying to do their jobs. Yet the Democrats want to tell people that they're the enemy. Yes, they do. David?
I'd like to remind the audience, please, not to engage in any kind of badgering of the candidates. We'd appreciate that.
Democrats' behavior in this issue is nothing short of treason. Democrats do not want law and order and safety. Democrats want chaos. Democrats want confusion. Democrats want instability. They want this so they can try to conceive the sheeple that they have the only solution and they can fix the problem. It's bullshit. Education in Wisconsin is further an embarrassment. One would think that with a governor that was once the state superintendent of schools, we'd have an excellent education system, but we don't. We don't because Tony Evers was a failed superintendent and is a failure as a governor as well. It is no wonder that things are a mess with Governor Vito at the helm. Here in Wausau, people wonder why we have such high and rising taxes. Well, maybe if Mayor Katie would spend time paying attention to her responsibilities and not attending socialist, progressive conferences in other countries, maybe she could work on those issues. But she can't be bothered with that.
Again, I'd like to remind everybody to please not engage in any kind of disruption.
David, why don't we have him leave? Why don't we have him leave?
He just left.
Good. People are fed up, and people are pissed, and things are going to change. Thanks, David.
If elected, how will you work to represent the people of central Wisconsin?
First and foremost, I'll be visible and accessible. I'll be present in every part of the district. The people in Hayward and Sawyer County are just as important as the people in Wausau and Marathon County. Ladysmith and Rusk County won't be a once-a-year appearance. people of Medford and Taylor County will know me by sight. I'll hear their concerns, their directions, and their ideas. I'll convey those things to my colleagues in the Senate. And let me be frank, I will be representing the people that voted for me first. If elected, it will be because I share their values. It'll be my job to convince those that don't agree with me that tax less, spend less, and regulate less benefits everyone, for it serves the common good, not the specific good of those who yell out in crowds, those with activist bullhorns or steaming political connections. My fellow senators will know that the senator from the 29th values the people of the 29th, their cities, towns, and villages. My fellow senators will know that the people of Exland or Gilman or Auburndale or the hundreds of small towns that many of you in this room don't even know, they'll know that I value what their needs are, and I think that their needs are just as great as those in Madison and Milwaukee or Green Bay. I will be a strong presence, a strong advocate, and a strong voice for every corner of the 29th.
And how do you plan to overcome partisanship and create an environment where productivity is restored in government?
It's a good laugh, David, and it's a loaded question. I am for smaller government. Secondly, productivity is a business term, and the government produces nothing. So, if by productivity you mean worthless virtue signaling legislation like a community for all, a truly divisive piece of legislation, then no, I don't want to overcome partisanship. There is no reason to. We are fighting for the soul of Wisconsin and the U.S. I will not work with anyone who thinks there are different genders other than male or female. If you think that those ideas are acceptable, then I and the vast majority of the 29th Senate District think you should take a long walk off a short bridge. Productivity will return to the state capitol when Democrats quit fighting about election integrity issues. Do you think it's productive to veto a bill that simply removes people who have died from the voter rolls? Productivity will return to the state capitol when Democrats quit pissing away tax dollars. Let's lower taxes before we spend excess tax dollars. Productivity will return to the state capitol when Democrats quit coming up with ways to limit our freedom. And productivity will return to the state capitol when Democrats are turned out by voters in a couple of weeks.
Thank you very much, and please join me in thanking Mr. Tomczyk for being with us this evening and participating in tonight's forum. Next up, we'd like to move on to our final race of the evening, the race for the State Assembly District number 85. With that, I'd like to introduce Ms. Kristin Conway to the stage. Please join me in welcoming her. Ms. Conway, thanks very much for joining us this evening. Please take the next 5 minutes and introduce yourself and your platform.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristin Conway. I was born and raised here in central Wisconsin. Moved to Minneapolis after college for a few years. And then, like a lot of Gen Xers, came back home to raise my family. I've lived in Schofield for the last 16 years with my husband and my 4 kids. For work, I've worked or volunteered for nonprofits my whole life, and I am currently an elected alder in Schofield since 2018. I decided to run because I have a vision of government that is full of ideas and discussions that works for the people, that's honest and ethical, and that gets things done. And I don't think we're seeing that right now. We have gerrymandered maps, which does nothing but create politicians who have no accountability. We have many candidates, including my opponent, who haven't answered a lot of questions, who don't make public appearances. His website hasn't been updated in 2 years. The majority of the electorate, I think, is voting based on the letter behind somebody's name. I have personal experience with Representative Snyder. We've talked about several issues, and I can tell you he's generally a pretty nice guy, and he'll tell you exactly what you want to hear. I believe that voters deserve an actual choice, and I believe that if everyone was actually aware of how their leaders, how their elected officials are voting, that they would vote differently. I'm also running because I was waking up every day just really mad, just angry. If someone claims to care about the mental health of our kids, they need to care about the mental health of all of our kids, including the trans and the gay kids. If someone wants to decrease the number of abortions, then I think it's important that they support comprehensive sex education, and that they make sure that places that provide low-cost birth control, like Planned Parenthood, are funded. If you really want a middle class to thrive, you need to increase the minimum wage and ensure that unions are strong, and you don't say that nobody wants to work, and that's why. And that calling Medicaid recipients welfare rights. I'm running because I think we're better than this.
Thank you for that introduction. With the 2022 fall election just 15 days away, what issues have come to the forefront in your campaign?
I have 4 things, and I'll try not to. I can't see the green light. Oh my goodness. I asked for a stool, and they didn't have one. So will you let me know if the light turns? Because I can't see it. Jeez, sorry. The issues that have come to the forefront: crime, abortion, the economy, and education. People are concerned about an increase in crime, and I think that's tied to a few things. First, not investing enough into our cities. I feel like a broken record talking about shared revenue. The state has quietly been defunding our cities and our police departments for years by refusing to increase shared revenue. This means that cities are struggling to pay for their vital services like police, fire, and EMTs. They're forced to pay more out of a shrinking pot. And second, we are not investing enough time in the middle class. For the first time in history, we have a generation, I'm raising a generation of kids who are not expected to be better off than we are. We need to invest in people, raising the minimum wage, bringing people out of poverty, investing in mental health and drug and alcohol addiction. As a nonprofit professional, I've always had a big picture outlook on things. So let's stop doing the same thing and expecting different results. Let's help people before they commit a crime. I support our police, and I support them having the resources they need to do their job, but we also can't expect our police to be alcohol and drug abuse counselors and mental health professionals and social workers. Let's let the police be the police. The second issue, abortion. Lawmakers should not be making private medical decisions for women, period. As far as some of the attack ads that my opposition have put out saying that I support abortion up to the day before delivery, that's ridiculous. And I didn't pause there, so I can't get a little clip of me saying that. Roe v. Wade gave women the right to their own bodily autonomy for 50 years and placed the medical decisions in the hands of medical professionals where it belongs. The economy, there are several things that state governments can do to help combat the effects of inflation. Unfortunately, our Republican-led assembly instead passed bills that dictated what kids could be taught, what name they can be called, demonized teachers, allowed 18-year-olds to buy AR-15s and bring them to school. They proposed a 0% increase in school funding, realized they couldn't do that, and then lied about it. Governor Evers has proposed dozens of ideas and plans on how to help residents find real relief right now. Investing in childcare, giving a tax cut to people that make less than $100,000, expanding the caregiver tax credit, and OMG, accepting the Medicaid funds. Education, it's not a secret anymore that the Republican plan for public education is to defund it and privatize it. I agree our current funding system is not working. The Blue Ribbon Commission on Schools came out with a dozen recommendations that have been ignored. Both DC Everest and Wausau have instrumentality charter schools. They allow for innovation in teaching methods, in grading, in curriculum, but they are still under the purview of a locally elected school board. They have a Montessori school, a project-based learning school, and a virtual academy. My kids have attended all of those. Voucher school programs that take our public tax dollars and give it to privately run, unaccountable schools cost $313 million in 2020. We can barely afford to fund one school system. Why are we trying to fund two?
If elected, how will you work to represent the people of central Wisconsin?
Honestly, transparently, and genuinely. I'm not a politician. I'm not going to stand up here and talk. Hopefully, I'll never run out of time because I hate listening to myself talk. I don't have enough to say about it, and y'all make me nervous. The people I represent will always know. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm not quiet and demure. You know exactly how I feel. And that's the way I've been in the city of Schofield, where we've made some tough decisions. And I was always very open about, yes, it was a tough decision for me, but this is why I made that decision. Did everyone agree with them? No. And that's okay. So I plan, like I said, to be very transparent and very open. And I expect to be held accountable, which I think will be a refreshing change for people.
What's your plan to overcome partisanship and create an environment where productivity is restored in government?
I would love to see that happen. I don't think we can overcome the partisanship if the Republicans keep their majority. They've proven that it's either their way or the highway. When Governor Evers was elected, they stripped as many powers as they could. Democrats in the Assembly this year wrote hundreds of bills, and only 2% of them even got a public hearing. The Republican legislature has been asked to come to the table and work together almost a dozen times this year on police reform, on COVID, on tax reform, and they've said, nah, they didn't even want to sit at a table. How is this helping Wisconsinites? It's not. I would love to see both sides of the table come together, but we have candidates, one who was right here on the stage earlier tonight, who has said, I'm not going to work with the Democrats when I get there. Until everyone stops talking in partisan rhetoric and talking points, we simply aren't going to get there. And not with the current crop of leaders that we have. I mean, I'm more than willing to, but.
Great, thank you. Please join me in thanking Ms. Conway for being here with us tonight. Thank you.
That's it, thank you.
And that brings us to our final participant this evening, Representative Pat Snyder. Please join me in welcoming Representative Snyder to the podium.
Hi, Dave. Hi, everyone.
Representative Snyder, please take the next 5 minutes and introduce yourself and your platform.
Sure. I'm Pat Snyder. I am seeking my 4th term for the 85th Assembly District. I moved up to the Wausau area. Actually, I grew up in the northwest side of Milwaukee back in the 60s, when actually we would be able to stay out at night when I was in grade school and junior high, and parents were okay with that. Times have changed now, not only there, but really everywhere. But in the same sense, my dad was a railroader, so at the end of my sophomore year of high school in Milwaukee, he was transferred out to the state of Iowa, where I graduated from high school, came down between Marquette and the University of Iowa, and believe it or not, folks, 1974, tuition was $625 a year. You can't get credit now these days with that, but in any case, I chose Iowa, which was good because that's where I met my wife. And we have been married for over 42 and a half years now. Luckily, I always wanted to get back up to the state of Wisconsin, and 2000, November of 2000, an opportunity came up for the morning show of WSAU radio. And so I took it, and I got in. And to kind of tell you the personality I had, I was told by my program director after 2 months on the air that I need to argue more with Tom or else they're going to have to find somebody else. So I started arguing with Tom, and the rest kind of became history. And even at the doors today, people say they miss the banter between Tom and myself over those times. But if you knew my wife, who is a Democrat, always has been, you would realize that if I had that attitude on the air at home, well, we wouldn't have made it 42 and a half years. We also have she says she votes for me, but it is a secret ballot, so I don't know. We do have 2 kids and 5 grandkids, welcomed our 5th just a few weeks ago. So that I think is my greatest accomplishment. It's my children. And I think that's what everyone should really think of as when they're asked, what's your greatest accomplishment in life? It's your children. Now, Maybe it's something different for those that chose not to have kids, but for me, it's my kids and then grandkids. And I think a lot of the troubles that we have statewide, nationwide, worldwide, is the breakdown of the family unit. And I'm seeing that as chairman of the Children's and Families Committee, where so many times these kids are in broken homes. One parent, sometimes not at their own fault. And what I have learned when I was the chairman of the task force on foster care is that many of these parents that have their children taken from them through Child Protective Services had a trauma through their life. It's a circle of viciousness that continues to go on. And until we invest in our kids and in our families and get them whole, we're going to see this vicious cycle continue on, where people are going to be either on state aid or worse, incarcerated. And that's something we don't want. We want successful careers. So that's why the Family First program is so important, because it intervenes and gets to at-risk families early to try to help them. So that's kind of my passion. I'm the chairman of the Children's and Families Committee. I tell my committee members when they walk in January for our first meeting to leave the D and the R at the door, because we're dealing with kids, and kids aren't political. And I don't like anyone who's trying to use children in any kind of political way. We need to let kids be kids, to educate them and move them forward so they're successful in their life ahead. And that's really, truly my passion, and I get to it maybe a little bit later. I'm not looking at the lights. Do we have lights up here? Well, I'll just keep rambling. I'm good at that from my radio days. But in any case, we just really need to focus on that, and child care is important. Representative Billings and I, we talked about working together. Well, she's a Democrat from La Crosse. We tried to get a legislative study committee on child care this last summer. It didn't get approved, but we want to make sure that we do continue to work, because I think deep down we're going to see this and other areas that we need to get common ground together, public and private partnerships. I think that's how we move things forward. So those are some of the priorities.
Great, thank you for that introduction. With the fall 2022 election just 15 days away, what are the issues that have come to the forefront in your campaign?
Well, as has been said several times, a lot of the folks at the door, the cost of everything, from gas to food to things of that nature. And inflation is something that has hit the United States, has hit the world, though 15 countries are doing better than we are. And I'm not an economist, and you hear them debate it back and forth. We put too much money in the system. We can put more money and reduce it. All I know is that we have to somehow get this thing reduced, and really the state doesn't have a lot of options that the federal government needs to do. The one thing we can do is, with the large amount of surplus that we have, be able to restructure some of our tax code and be able to have people keep more of their money at the end of the year and not have to put more into taxes. A lot of that surplus would be one-time money. It's not something we can supply, and then suddenly if we hit a recession, which I hope we don't, we would suddenly have to look at funds. How do we fund this again? We need to make it a one-time funding mechanism, which could help in some of the social programs. I wouldn't mind seeing it maybe in some of the educational, technical college, to help with careers for some of the folks that are working their way up and would like to be able to take some of the jobs that are out there. That is one area that is increasingly of need that I hear from a lot of our economic leaders, is we need workers. And I tell you what, folks, we have to face it. We are going to need to provide immigration. And the fact of the matter is, we want legal immigration. I don't know why the federal government, both parties, dropped the ball on this. Why we can't, my dad told me back in the 70s and 80s, the Chicago Northwestern, they had job brokers or employment brokers in Mexico where they said, okay, we need 400 workers for a tie gang or for a rail gang this summer. They'd go down, they'd find the people, they would be identified, They'd have, their license and things. Everything would be up. They'd come up and work, and everything was fine. Why we can't do something like that here in the state of Wisconsin? Why we can't reach out? I tell you what, CNAs are in need. Nursing homes are closing wings down because they don't have enough help. And if you've been in a fast food line, you're saying it's taking a lot longer. They just don't have the staff. I really need to look at this a little more because it didn't seem to be a problem before COVID, but it seems like everyone out there has a job and we have low unemployment benefits being paid out. And when we talk about unemployment, one of the areas that I think we can do, and I've been trying to do the last couple of sessions, working with Representative Krug, who's the committee chair of the benefits program, is instead of a fiscal benefit cliff, which really makes people have a choice if they get up to a point where they get a job that will give them pay raise or a promotion, and they got to say, I can't take it because I can't lose Badger Care or I can't lose this. That's ridiculous, a fiscal cliff. We need a fiscal slope where we're still incentivizing them to take that job, to work up, and still not lose the whole benefit package that they might need to get them to their final destination of full financial security. So those are some of the things, and it's tough. It's tough because, you know what? They're right. We do beat our heads against the wall with some folks on my side of the aisle and some on the other side. There is certain things, my right to try bill that I got done the first time in 2017, that was tried 2 other sessions, and it finally got through before it got federally approved by Senator Johnson. Another bill, I've been trying to work on a bill that would make Hmong history, especially the history of what happened when they got to America and the hurdles they crossed and the success they've had. To have that part of it, I've worked with Representative Shanklin and then Hung this last time, it won't get through. My own party's blocking it. So you got to have patience, you got to be persistent, and you got to keep pushing on this. I thought when I worked for Congressman Duffy that government was slow, and he's right, federal government is slow, but I tell you, state government sometimes isn't as much, and there is a lot of politics that shouldn't be part of some of the things that we have issues for.
If elected, how will you work to represent the people of central Wisconsin?
Well, the one thing that I do, and the one thing that has been told to me, even by people that disagree with me, is that I do listen. When I was out at the fairgrounds, Nancy Stencil and I talked about water and water quality, which is very important. And she had a lot of good points. And we were able to have a conversation about things like that. That's the one thing. I'm approachable, and granted, it might not always come to fruition, but it's going to be at least brought up in my caucus when things like this happen. Some of the things I'm going to be working on is next. Right now, we are very close of getting a forensic medical lab, morgue, out at NTC College. It's going to take $10.6 million. We thought we might get it from the governor with the ARPA funds, but it just didn't quite work out. So I'm going to have to put in a budget motion with the Joint Finance Committee and get the Building Commission on board as well. This would provide 2 pathologists, and it would not only serve Marathon County with autopsies, but it would also serve several dozen, 2 dozen or more counties around northern Wisconsin. Plus, the DCI would relocate to this area for their criminal justice to be able to do work in this building as well. That's one area that I want to see be able to move forward. Working with Jeff Sargent, back in 2017, I was able to get a $250,000 per biennium for the 211 calling system. Well, now with the load, they need a little bit more money, so I'll move forward on that. I also work forward with the Boys and Girls Club, with the Bridge Clinic. Bridge Clinic's in desperate need of trying to find dentists because they just can't compete with the private sector. That's an area we need to work on as well. And then businesses. I think one of the main things I want to try to work on, Representative Mako, who's part of my Ways and Means Committee, he was thinking of, and again, we have to discuss it, but to designate 1 cent of our sales tax and put it directly toward municipalities and villages for their shared revenue increase. Because we do need to supply the task force of police, ambulance, and fire, and so this is something that's very necessary for us to do. So those are some of the areas. And again, workers. We have to provide that because Wausau, I think, has all the tools it needs right now to be able to become like Appleton, Fox Valley, and other communities like that. We just have to invest in ourselves, and I want to help be part of that as well.
And what is your plan to overcome partisanship and create an environment where productivity is restored in government?
Well, you know, the fact of the matter is that I do work with a lot of Democrats across the aisle. They come to my office a lot with ideas, and I will say that some of the things that we do, like when we were on the foster care task force, we had 13 bills that came up, and Representative Doyle out of La Crosse, and Representative Billings, and some of the other Democrats that were on there had bills of their own that we included, but the Senate wouldn't take up the bills if it was a Democrat lead. Stupid. So what we'd do is I would be a lead, Representative Doyle would be the second, and then when we had the open hearing in a committee meeting, I would let Representative Doyle be the one who led the conversation of why this bill was important. So it was stupid political stuff, but in the same sense, we're able to get around that and show that, you know, 94% of the time, folks, we do vote bipartisan. It's the 6% that kind of make the headlines, and some of the things that might need a lot more discussion when we move forward on this. You know, another example is that I want to work on, and I can't get my caucus to get around it, and I'm trying to work on it in some other areas. But right now, the infant mortality and the maternal fatality of our African-American community in Milwaukee is high. For a country like ours, that shouldn't be happening. And I want to have at least get a hearing and find out why in the world was we be one of the leaders in the nation for that statistic. Is it something we're not offering? Are we doing it on purpose? Are we not doing enough prenatal care? I just think it needs to be addressed because, again, as chairman of the Children's and Families, kids are very important to me, and we need to have them with growing up in an environment of love and health and education. And you know, when it comes to education, I get very along well with both Wausau and D.C. Everest school districts. Superintendent Hiltz and now Superintendent Casey Nye, they are both tremendous leaders. I attend all the CISA 9 meetings, and I want to tell you right now, CISA 9 has a lot of good stuff going. One of the bad things that go out there is that you have the report card of as far as the literacy of reading, writing, and math. And yes, COVID did hurt us, and we are falling behind. But the one nice thing that CISA 9 is doing, instead of just a snapshot of the test, they're also going a little further into what's happening with that student and showing the improvement that they're having through the school year, or some of the flags that they might need to address as teachers. So we'll go again with our joint finance to make sure we fund our educational system. I do know there's been talk in the governor's race about a universal school choice and things of that nature. I don't know what kind of fruition would come for that if the federal money follows the student. If it did, I did talk to some educators in the public school system, and I have to agree with them. If something like that did happen, then the private schools, the charter schools, would have to be on the same equity level as our public schools to be able to take that money. And I think it could be done. So those are some of the things that I would work on for the central Wisconsin, and I'm always here to try to, a lot of my bills that come up are related to the state of Wisconsin. I know one came from the City Council of Wausau when there was a gentleman that unfortunately had some tough luck in his life and had some arrest records and wanted to work at a convenience store or a grocery store, and he couldn't get a liquor license because the current license system, you could be either a bartender or serve it, you know, as somebody buys something at the store. So he was denied. So I'm reaching out, trying to work with Representative Swearingen to get a statewide bartender license. And so that would be registered through the state. They could really locate anywhere. We can figure out how to reimburse counties or municipalities for that, but then it would give some of the people that aren't being bartenders, that are just trying to get a license to be able to sell it, they wouldn't be hurdled or straddled with the case of any kind of background that wouldn't allow them to move forward. So again, people bring me ideas, And in a lot of ways, my main goal is I want to find solutions to problems. And sometimes we can't get everything we want. As the old Reagan story went, take 80% of the loaf. Well, I tell you, I'll take 60% of the loaf rather than let someone go hungry.
With that, please join me in thanking Representative Snyder for being here tonight and participating. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here this evening. I'd like to extend additional thanks to the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service, the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point at Wausau, and the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce. On that note, we'd like to encourage you to exercise your right to vote on November 8th. Thank you, and have a great evening.